we have here something very valuable to some people. So now I hope nobody starts charging down the aisle just to get your hands on these, because we have here a bag of Skittles. A bag of Skittles, okay? And just to make sure that we're kind of covering all the bases here, we also have a bag of Starburst. Now, just in case there might be one or two here that don't know about this, this is the most sought after candy by our kids. This is what they want. This is what they ask us for. And of course, the Skittles and the Starburst are right in the checkout aisle of the store, right? Just happen to be there. And the kids ask for the Skittles. And they keep asking. They don't stop. And all those nice reasons that we give them, why? Because you're going to eat dinner shortly, or you already had too many of these today, all that kind of stuff doesn't make much sense to them, so they're just going to keep on asking, hoping that you will see the light and give them the Skittles. Well, our gospel tells us, our readings today tell us to ask God for what we need and don't give up. Ask God for what we need and don't give up. In a way, the kids have it right, don't they? They keep asking. And that's really the lesson of today's readings. In our gospel, Jesus teaches the disciples how to pray. And he teaches them the very familiar words of the Our Father. It's a prayer that most of us know, and we'll be praying it at Mass this morning. And the real lesson is in the first two words. The first two words. We get those down, we got the lesson. He said, Our Father. Our Father. Telling him to go to God as one would to a loving and caring parent. Always hears what the child needs. A loving parent to whom there's certainly nothing to fear and everything to be given. The parent who is always there for that child. That's how we go to God. He also tells them to pray for what they truly need, food for the day, forgiveness, and not just for what they want. And finally, tells them, pray that you're not tempted beyond what you can resist. Pray that you're not so tempted that you can't resist. In the second half of the gospel, Jesus gives them an example of persistence. Tells them a story. Says, suppose one of you had a friend to whom he goes at midnight and says, friend, lend me 3 loaves of bread, for a friend of mine has arrived at my house from a journey, and I have nothing to offer him. Well, he tells us that the owner of the house will give the man what he needs, even if it's just to get rid of him. Even if just to get him out of here so that he and his family can go back to sleep. Well, how much more will God answer our requests when we go to God? How much more will God hear us? There can be some problems when we pray. All of us have prayed for something, probably, and didn't seem to receive it. And when that happens, it's possible that we give up and stop asking God. The answer is really in the words of the Our Father. And we might have prayed it so often that we almost forgot the words. Remember what the prayer says. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Your kingdom come, your will be done. Not mine. We're saying God's will be done. Not mine necessarily. And that is the tough part. That's the tough part. I know that's a tough part for me anyway. We're called to put ourselves in the hands of God. And God's view of what we need might be very different from what we think we need. Now, many of us might be able to recall a time when we've prayed for something and we didn't seem to receive it, but God answered our prayers in a very different way, and that's what was so good. So let's just stop for a minute and see how many of us can just recall a time when God answered our prayers, but in a very different and better way. What do you think? How many here, just if you want to raise your hand, how many here can think of a time when you prayed and God answered in a different way, and that was what was great? How many? I know I have. Yeah, pretty good number. Okay. Well, maybe there's a couple of people that could remind us of some important lessons about praying. Very ordinary people who remind us of what we need to remember. And the other day, I was walking in the neighborhood, and I saw Linda on her porch, surrounded by some of her many children and grandchildren. And I know that Linda has had some serious health problems. And as we talked a little bit, she kind of told me that now she seems to be going blind on top of all the rest. And she pointed out some flowers that were in front of the porch. And she said, now I can only see how beautiful these flowers are when I get right up next to them. Then I can see it. And her greatest wish would be that her eyes will hold up so that she can see her first great-grandchild will be born sometime later in the year. Wants to see that great-grandchild. But in the end, she said, well, it's all in the hands of God. It's all in the hands of God. And Linda quite simply reminds us that it's God's will that's to be done, and not just ours. We put ourselves in God's hands. And last Sunday, at the Mass down at the Brady Center, Susan prayed for her nephew, one of her many nephews. And that very morning, she said, she looked out and saw him running through the neighborhood in a crazed state, just a crazed state, due to using drugs. She prayed for him. And then she turned to the young people that were at the Mass. And she says, I also pray to God that none of you young people will ever start using drugs. And finally she said, but I also pray that if ever you do use drugs, you'll know that you could come to me to talk. I pray that you will come to me to talk about it. She said, you know, when I was young and I started using drugs myself, I didn't seem to have anybody I could talk to. And I pray you can talk to me. And Susan quite simply reminds us that we can go to our God even with needs that seem to be hopeless, even needs that seem to be impossible. We can go to God also with all those needs that are so personal, all those needs that we couldn't even talk about to others. But those are the needs, too, we can take to God. So as we continue on now and we prepare to share in the body and blood of Christ, let's quite simply ask our God for the strength we need to put ourselves in the hands of God and pray without giving up.